Are we finally on the train from potential to pragmatic as a nation? He's barely 2 weeks on the saddle. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu can't seem to wait for his heels to touch the ground. He said through the campaign last year that he would hit the ground running, but he has zoomed off even before landing. He is rolling out new policy directions on petroleum, education, currency, and not to mention the suspensions and appointments. Let's take a dive into the Students' Loan Act, signed into law by Mr. President on the 12th of June, which is observed as Democracy Day in Africa's largest democracy. Welcome to Deepening the Conversation on our analysis on issues and politics drawn from Conversation with Azu, the Friday column on the back page of Leadership newspaper. Deepening the Conversation is a weekly diary on life and politics written by Azu Shekwene. Our focus today is based on the article Plugging Gaps in the Students' Loan Scheme. As always, it is an interesting read that not only contextualizes issues, but educates and broadens your perspectives on Nigerian, African, and global realities. Let's engage with Azu about what he has written and why he has written what he has written about the Students' Loan Scheme. It's good to have you, Mr. Azu.
Thanks for having me, Julius.
I think a good place to start this conversation is from the office of the president. He has hit the ground running with different policy pronouncements at very quick intervals, and including this policy on the education loan scheme. Do you think he should have waited for some of the gaps that you are pointing out now to be filled before making a formal pronouncement?
Well, thank you once again for having me. I do not think so. It would have been nice, but we do not have the entire details of how it's going to be implemented. I think where we find ourselves in many respects in Nigeria today is such that whoever is at the helm will be like a pilot that would have to depend on the entire crew to fix the plane in flight, so to speak. I do not think that one thing has to wait and you have to have all the ducks in a row before you start solving the problem. What he has done is good signaling. It also sets the tone for policy. But of course, beyond signaling and setting the tone for policy, you also have to then move beyond that to institutionalize. And I think that that is where the some of the suggestions I made come in. I understand that the loan will kick in from September or so. I think there's still a bit of time for some of the basic things for some of those things, if the government thinks them worthy to be implemented before it starts. But also keep in mind that we are not reinventing the wheel. So there is nothing that the government sets itself to do regarding how to institutionalize or implement those things that cannot be done between, at least that they cannot start doing in earnest between now and September.
Yeah, you almost preempted my next question, which is that we've had similar policies like this in the past, including the setup of an education bank under the military administration. So is it a question of sustainability or policy consistency? Why is the return of this policy sounding so new, as it were?
I think it's a number of factors, and I think you touched on a number of them. The policy was first started by Gowon. I think it started it in 1974, and then down the line between 1993 and I believe 1994 under Babangida's government, some amendments were made to the decree under which it was originally started. So, but it's not new as such. But the reason why, like most things, we tend to start well, and a number of things we start with a lot of fanfare, but then sustainability then becomes a problem for all sorts of reasons. Either because governments come and go, and subsequent governments are just not interested, or because of some institutional issues, corruption creeps in and all sorts of things begin to happen. But I think a fundamental thing that has also happened between 1974 and now is a significant explosion in the student population. And that significant explosion would have required systemic changes in how the policy was run and implemented to respond to the changing environment. Unfortunately, that was not
And you've been quite unsparing of public universities, and your proposition that it should just be limited to 2 or 3 per zone doesn't take into cognizance the fact that we have a huge population of young school leavers trying to go into the tertiary education system. How about the opportunity for the lower middle class who can't afford education in private tertiary institutions, and the states, because the state tertiary institutions tend to be higher in terms of cost and tuitions and all of that?
Well, I think it might be useful at this time to look at some numbers actually. The number that is available at JAM suggests that, well, you have all sorts of things banded. Some people say, well, it's between 1.6 and 1.8 million people who apply through JAM to various institutions of higher learning every year. But of course, you know that there are basic requirements before you can qualify to go to an institution of higher learning. And some of those basic requirements will include credit passes in English and mathematics. So at the end of the day, if you look at the actual numbers that make it, that qualify, I think it's between 7 and 800,000. That's what I'm getting from Jen.
Yeah, that does sorry,
No, please go
I'm
ahead.
jumping in. That does not factor in the number of students who come in through preliminary admissions.
Yes,
Sometimes that is even larger than those who apply through JAM.
Well, I don't know what the numbers are saying in that
Okay.
regard, but I'm looking at the numbers that come in through JAM. Perhaps if you know what the numbers, but my sense and my guess is that it will not be as significant as the numbers that go in through because I'm not looking now at only universities. I'm looking at colleges of education. I'm looking at
Polytechnics,
I'm looking at
monotechnics.
universities and all of that. And you know there is one clearing house, so to speak, through which they all go, and that's JAM. And the JAM numbers are not as great as you find in a lot of publications. I think the JAM numbers are anything between 7 and 800,000 in terms of those who actually qualify, who have the requisite qualification, and who are offered and who accept admission. So that is what it was. But again, back in 1974, so when that scheme started, the entire the 6, what you now call the 6 pupil results, there were about 6 federal universities at that time, and the numbers 14 to 16,000 compared to the hundreds of thousands that you have today. But as I said, the system has not sufficiently been responsive in terms of how it then deals with some of these issues that we are dealing with. And yes, you mentioned bursaries. Some states, there are different levels of intervention. And there's nothing that we are doing or that there's something that I have said that is reinventing the way. There are different levels of intervention that take into cognizance the disparities also in income and status levels across society. So there's bursary, there is scholarship, and of course there's the loan. And they don't all mean the same thing. Okay, so bursary and scholarships you don't have to repay.
Yeah.
But of course the loan you repay. And so some states offer a bursary to students from there, and some offer scholarships depending on the types of subjects those students are offering and what they think of those subjects. But what we are talking about here, I believe, is the loan, not the bursary. And it does not mean that bursaries and scholarships cannot go hand in hand with the loan. Sure, they can, and they did in the past. So I don't see any reason why. But then, of course, the critical distinction has to be made about how the loan is implemented. Because remember what we call it a loan. That means it's something that has at some point to be repaid.
Okay. You are opposed to having more than 2 branches of the proposed education bank nationwide. Correct. Drawing from the general elections, considering our rather poor ICT infrastructure, isn't that a very tall order?
No, it is not. It is not. It's certainly not a tall order. When this thing was implemented in the past, of course, it was implemented by the loans board through the universities, and there's no reason. Um, and I do not entirely agree that we have not reached the level. There are some banks that are entirely online that do entirely provide entirely online services. I know you can say that they are playing to a niche audience, but I know that while there are still infrastructural challenges, I do not think we have reached a level where if you want to implement a scheme like a student's loan, depending, of course, on how you choose to implement it, which is, I hope we get to in this conversation. I do not see the reason why you need 36, you have one in Abuja. It's just job for the boys, and that's what politicians are doing. I think we've had enough of that. If it's something that politicians are serious about, and which I hope they are serious about and want to implement carefully and thoroughly, I think that it is possible with existing level of infrastructure to implement it in such a way that you probably don't need more than one or two branches of the bank to implement the loan through the universities.
Okay, and yeah, you propose that the loan should be biased in favor of students in science, um, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and there is the PTDF, that is the Petroleum Technology Development Funds, which has a scholarship students for students in that general area. So shouldn't it be thrown open to all students in technical and vocational institutions?
Okay, that's an important question, but it's also good for us to draw a distinction between the scholarship and the loan, as I said. The Petroleum Technology Development Fund is a scholarship that has a bias for overseas students in areas of masters and PhD. Of course, there is a local or domestic internal element to it, but it's not as great as not as focused, not as geared towards institutions locally as it is geared towards those studying abroad. And also, it also has a bias for oil and gas. There's a bit of extension outside oil and gas, but the strong bias is for those in the oil and gas industry because that was the original purpose for which
It was established.
was established. And as I also said, STEM, if the proposing that the loan should be for STEM students, would be, of course, for STEM students from the basic level. I mean, by basic, of course, I mean the first degree level, if you are looking at a university, for example. Okay, so it will not be only for those in masters doing their masters or PhD alone, but be open to all those who are doing STEM courses. And also keep in mind that I did not suggest in my article that all the 2 or 3 universities that should be STEM biased or STEM focused in the zones, as I said, the universities should be restructured, should all be doing STEM. No. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 out of the 3 should be STEM biased and STEM focused.
Okay. And finally, the government is saying terms and conditions apply. Beneficiaries of the loan are expected to pay back 2 years after their national service. And the question here is, what happens to those who are unable to get employment 2 years post-graduation?
That is precisely why you need STEM to get this done. Because you see, the current curriculum or the current curricula, depending on how you choose to look at it in most universities, is just largely geared towards producing garbage in, garbage out. All right? So most of the graduates that are produced have actually no relevance to industry. Okay? So until you deal with that, you will really not be able to deal with the fundamental problem of excess supply, so to speak. All right. So until there's an alignment between what you call town and gown, what universities are doing and what industry actually, we will continue to have. So any incentivization should be geared towards what industry needs, towards things that are relevant and useful and beneficial both to the students and to the general society. I am not despising any particular course. I come from a social science and humanities background. But I am saying to myself that there comes a time when difficult and hard choices have to be made. And so if you choose to study anything other than those STEM courses, well, you have to pay for such courses from your pocket. Or explore other options to pursue your career.
Well, this is a good place to wrap up this conversation. Conversation with Azu is published on the back page of Leadership newspaper every Friday and syndicated in the Vanguard. It is further syndicated in Europe, in the United States, in Argentina, and it is rich in content in terms of discussions on national issues and politics. Make sure you visit, share, like our content on the back page of Leadership newspaper. You can further visit our site on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to get the depth of our content. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming on the show, Mr. Azu.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.